So hopefully everybody's in the right place. My name is Jennifer Alpha, and I am a senior consultant with TDA Consulting. And we're going to do some introductions here in a moment of the rest of TDA's team, as well as some city staff. But to give you a general overview of what you'll be learning today and hearing, I just wanted to give you this short little agenda that we have for the next hour. So we're going to have a small presentation on what is HOME-ARP. So we'll be talking about the HOME-ARP program, its eligible uses and beneficiaries, and a little bit about the process of developing an allocation plan for the use of HOME-ARP funds. We're also going to be having an open discussion. This discussion is intended to collect information from the public about community needs. As you'll be hearing throughout the presentation, we are doing a lot of different community outreach methods. This is one of 3 community meetings for the HOME-ARP allocation plan. There's also a community meeting tomorrow on housing and another one on services. And so if you are interested in those topics, there's still time to sign up for those as well. Just be aware that this first portion of the slides will be the same for every meeting, but the questions for discussion will be tailored around those different topics. So before our discussion today, we'll have a list of questions that will be facilitated. And we're really looking to collect feedback from you all and to have an engaging conversation. And so that's our objective for today. So let me go ahead and move on to introductions. So again, my name is Jennifer Alpha. I'm a senior consultant with TDA Consulting, and we've been asked to assist the city with the development of a HOME-ARP allocation plan. And I will describe what that is in just a moment. To save time, I'm going to introduce the rest of our team as well. We have Doug Carlson, also a consultant with TDA, Alex Tester, who will be helping us with the coordination of this call. And you probably received an email from Alex because she's been helping to coordinate all of our community outreach. And we also have Noah Woodward, who's been helping us with our data analysis. So that's our TDA team. So I'll hand it over to the city to say hello.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Albanese, and I am with the City of Mesa, the Housing and Community Development Division of the Community Services Department.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Boyd. I'm the Housing and Community Development Administrator, and we sincerely appreciate your time and being here today.
Thank you. All right, so for those of you who are just joining the meeting, we asked everyone at the beginning of the session to add to the chat their name, organization, your zip code if you like, and then your email address as well. This will serve as our virtual sign-in sheet for today. So if you have not already done that, then please go ahead and add that information. I see that someone is having some trouble hearing. You might want to check your audio controls in your settings for Zoom. We are talking, so if you don't hear us, that would be why. But if you can't hear us, you didn't hear me say that. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a little chat to this person because I think they sent it to me directly. All right. Okay. Moving on. Hopefully everybody's signed in. So I'm going to go over a few slides here on what is HOME-ARP, what it can be used for, what the eligible populations are, and to talk to you a little bit about our process for developing an allocation plan. So HOME-ARP is a program that was allocated under the American Rescue Plan, which obviously is in response to COVID-19. And this entire program provides $5 billion to assist individuals or households who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, and other vulnerable populations by providing housing, rental assistance, supportive services, and non-congregate shelter. And the whole objective of the program is to help reduce homelessness and increase housing stability across the country. So there are 651 state and local participating jurisdictions, otherwise known as HUD grantees, that qualified for an annual HOME-ARP allocation for fiscal year 2021. And all 651 of these grantees are eligible to receive HOME-ARP grants. And of course, one of those jurisdictions is the City of Mesa. So these funds were obligated on September 20th, 2021, and the city received an allocation of about $5.6 million. As part of this allocation, PJs are required to create an allocation plan. And you can think of this plan as sort of a strategic plan that's going to outline how the funds are going to be spent. This allocation plan requires both data analysis, so we're going to be collecting data from major data sources like the census, CHADS data, ACS, data from the continuum of care, other data sources relating to the use of rental assistance funds and vouchers and things like that. But we're also reaching out to community organizations who help us find additional data around the qualifying populations that I'll talk about in just a moment, and help us quantify some of the needs that those populations have. So that data process is already underway, and we've been collecting that information. In addition to that, we are doing community outreach. And as I mentioned, we have a series of community meetings, just like this one. This is the very first one. We'll also be doing 2 meetings tomorrow, one on housing and one on services. In addition to that, we have an online community survey, and we'll be dropping the link for that community survey into the chat by the end of the call so that everybody has an opportunity to complete that survey if you haven't already come across the link and completed it. That survey will be really helpful to us in being able to better identify what folks think are the top community needs. If you are affiliated with an organization and have the ability to share the survey link either through email or your social media, or if you can, share it with your clients as they come in, it's really helpful to us to have our community partners help survey. In addition to that, we are doing one-on-one stakeholder interviews to better understand needs of specific populations. So this data and community outreach gives us lots of information about community needs and gaps in meeting those needs across the city. And that information is taken and then considered by the city to develop the HOME-ARP allocation plan, in which they will decide how to spend the HOME-ARP funds. Now, as you can see, these funds were allocated back in 2021. However, in November, just this past November, just a few months ago, HUD decided that this HOME-ARP allocation plan should have a deadline. It didn't previously have a deadline, but the deadline is now March 31st. So the city is in the process of working towards meeting that new deadline that HUD has set. So this plan will be submitted by early March. And we'll talk a little bit more about the process for getting that plan submitted at the end of our meeting. So these grants do expire by September 30th, 2030. And what that means is that all funds need to be expended by that date. After this date, no additional funds can be spent. So everything needs to be completed by September 30th, 2030. So let's talk a little bit about what HOME-ARP can do. So if there's anybody out there who understands the HOME program, these HOME-ARP funds are being funneled through the HOME program, so to speak, but there are different requirements for HOME-ARP than there are for HOME. So if you are familiar with HOME, just know that it doesn't function quite the same way. A lot of the requirements are the same, but the uses and eligible populations are very different. And so for eligible uses, there are 4 eligible uses under HOME-ARP. You can do production or preservation of affordable housing, tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, homeless prevention services, and housing counseling. So there's a very long list of services that are eligible under HOME-ARP when we're to look at the notice, the federal notice that HUD put out. And then the final use is the purchase and development of non-congregate shelter. So these are the 4 eligible uses. These are the only uses. So, you know, things that are otherwise available to the home program are not included unless they're in this list. In addition to that, there are 4 distinct qualifying populations. And so this is another place where HOME-ARP really differs from regular home. And so the qualifying populations that must be served with HOME-ARP funds are those who are currently sheltered or unsheltered and experiencing homelessness. And all of these qualifying populations have very specific definitions. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of these definitions, but you have some information there on the screen if you want to dig into that a little bit deeper. But basically, folks experiencing homelessness, those who are housed but at risk of homelessness, people fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And then finally, other families requiring services or housing assistance to prevent homelessness. So this is sort of the other vulnerable population category where they're facing housing instability. So those are the folks who can be served under those 4 distinct eligible uses that we just talked about on the last screen. So as I mentioned, the purpose for today is to really collect information from the public about the needs that you see relating to shelter, housing, and service needs, specifically around those who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness, or those who have other special needs. And so by collecting this information from the public, we're able to supplement the data analysis that we're doing and then give a better picture to the city of what the needs might be and how the city might be able to use the funds. As we all know, needs always exceed available resources. And so we could take that $5.6 million and funnel it into any one of those eligible uses and probably still not touch the needs in the city. So it's always, you know, a difficult decision to decide how to spend funds, but we're here today to better understand what folks think about how those funds should be used. So we will be focusing on collecting your information and your perspectives over the next about hour-ish, about 40 minutes or so. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to turn it over to Doug to help facilitate this discussion.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everybody. There's a couple of options for answering these questions. You have, everybody is muted, but you have the option to come off mute and give us your answer to each particular question. If you're not comfortable with that or would prefer to use the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. Again, the meeting's being recorded. We're also collecting all the chat information, including your responses, as part of our collection of the consultation information for City of Mesa's HOME-ARP plan. In some cases, you may have seen these questions in some other form before if we've interviewed you directly for one reason or another. So bear with us, but keep giving us your answers because we need to know what you think the needs are within this community. So again, use the chat or come off mute, whatever you feel comfortable with. So the first question is, what housing delivery models work or don't work, in your opinion, for those who are homeless? Anybody want to respond, or oh, where we go? We have something in the chat. Okay. So counseling, cost of housing has been coming up a lot. Yeah. Rent increases, I'm assuming, is what's being mentioned there. Bridges to permanent housing through transitional housing. Anything else? All good ideas. I'm gonna give it a couple more seconds. We have several questions, so I want to make sure. Housing first. There's, by the way, there's a new federal initiative, strategic initiative to end homelessness. It just came out today from the White House. And it discusses in part the housing first model. So you'll probably see a bunch of media about that in the near future. Just came out today. Okay, let's
And
move to the next.
Doug,
Go ahead, Jennifer.
somebody mentioned in the chat that what doesn't seem to work for some folks, I believe, is what they're saying, permanent supportive housing.
Mhm.
So if that person wouldn't mind expanding a little bit on that
Mhm.
comment, you can just
Oh,
add it to the chat, and then we'll better understand what the concerns are around that. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, PSH is permanent supporting housing, which means basically affordable housing in perpetuity for as long as somebody wants to stay there, with wraparound services to support them.
Okay.
Got it. So yes, some folks are probably do better in transitional settings before they're moved into a PSH setting. Housing first is still the priority, at least at the federal level. Some form of housing. Let's go to the next question if we can, because we're going to have limited time to get through all these. Keep answering, however, even if you're thinking still about question one. No problem. Respond to those questions as we're going through them. What do you think is the most effective strategy for reducing homelessness and for those who are at risk of homelessness? Remember that HOME-ARP is actually serving people, intended to serve people who are at risk of homelessness, also known as diversion or prevention strategies, as well as for people who meet the literal homeless definition under the HUD Consolidated Plan and McKinney Act definitions. And shelter safety is definitely very important. Non-congregate shelter, again, is an eligible activity. Okay, Jennifer, put the question in the chat if you want to respond via the chat, or you can come off mute and give us your opinion. Rent forgiveness, issues with rent increases, paying for transition into doing housing navigation, startup costs for people who are trying to get into a rental unit. Yeah. Education, job assistance always comes up. Thank you for putting that in. Financial education, right? All strategies for helping people become self-sufficient. The issue with criminal records and their effect on the ability to access housing in one way or another has come up a lot as well. Child care assistance, again, also come up a lot. Yeah, really good stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Housing counseling and rental assistance is part of the HOME-ARP program delivery options as well. Yeah, these are great answers. Thank you. Let's go to question 3. Again, keep answering the prior questions if you want to. We want to collect as much information as we can. Definitely jobs, job training, access to employment is mentioned quite a bit. Helping people, these are all self-sufficiency type services, which are critically important. So thanks for putting those in. What are the gaps in services for people who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, and how can we improve? Employment is coming up a lot, so thank you for that. So it looks like access to employment services or job opportunities is a huge issue in your area. Substance abuse, rehab, right? Some form of detoxification and rehab for people who are experiencing substance abuse issues, mental health treatment. For CMI folks, yes, thank you. Oh, animal care, that's interesting. That does not come up. So that is very interesting, especially for people who use their pets in ways to help with their mental health issues in one way or another. I know I do. I have a dog. I love him to death. He's my therapy dog. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, animal care. Yes. Weather issues, most definitely weather issues would make sense to me, by the way, for people to get out of the weather, particularly in the summer when it gets very, very hot in your area. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And then transportation has come up numerous times as well. Right. Yeah. Documentation, sounds like identification, meaning documentation or access to getting a social security number, getting vital records. I'm assuming this is dealing in some part with people who are undocumented. And healthcare. Yeah, healthcare, legal assistance, all good. Childcare again. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, these are fantastic. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, let's move to question 4. So this is a little bit of a different question. This question asks what gaps in services exist for people who are already housed, but are vulnerable to potentially losing their housing, or they have special needs of one kind or another. So what gaps in services for that kind of subgroup, if you will, of the homeless or at-risk population is needed? What services are needed for those populations? And Jennifer, put the question in the chat for you to just look at. We don't have a ton of information or data, I don't think, on the needs of people who have special needs that are either at risk of homelessness or homeless. So anything you have is good. Yeah, rents, right? Cost of rents. So stabilizing by not having major rent increases, counseling, therapy, right? Navigation has come up actually several times, the ability to help clients navigate through the process in one way or another, whether it's access to housing or education or employment or anything else. We've actually heard that quite a bit. And minimum wage, jobs, right? Rent forgiveness, stabilization, tenant rights. Some of these issues are not going to be solved by HOME-ARP, obviously. So just keep that in mind. HOME-ARP is simply a program that provides resources for some of these activities. Some of the other issues around that are legal issues are not going to be resolved, unfortunately, by HOME-ARP. Great. And then the lack of available affordable housing, medical care, right? Issues with people with neurological disorders. Thank you. Really good. Seniors have come up a lot recently, by the way, as part of our discussions with groups, and making sure that seniors don't fall into housing, into homelessness or lose their housing in one form or another. So thanks for adding that, because that has actually come up quite a bit. And then having access to housing that's affordable or have vouchers available for seniors. So thank you. Really good. All right, I think we can go to question 5. We've heard a little bit about this already, but we want to nail this down a little more specifically in terms of your knowledge and expertise. What do you think is the biggest challenge for low-income families and individuals when it comes to finding and securing affordable housing? What are the barriers, in other words, to people who are low income to finding and securing housing? Low credit scores, right? Or issues with credit. Yeah. Which prevents them from being accepted by a property management company or some other entity because they don't have good credit. We've heard that before too. Yeah, right. And then having access to housing that's affordable. So it's a rental housing supply issue, which is predominant in all of the West. Lack of units. Being able to navigate, finding units that are affordable somehow, having help with finding affordable and accessible units. Keeping housing down to the appropriate income levels, which is around 30% of income typically is considered affordable. Evictions, and then issues with landlords not taking assistance, vouchers, not accepting people who are low and moderate income. Yeah, those are all very good. Help with move-in costs, first, last deposits. Lack of a rental history and credit history. Again, those are definitely barriers for people who are working minimum wage jobs or have issues in some way or another with securing housing. Those are all fantastic. Thank you. And housing quality. That's a good one, actually, because we don't want housing that is poor quality. Yeah, and then being able to furnish their homes and have groceries. Those are all great answers. And we have heard a little bit about accepting public assistance for housing in the private market. So we've heard a little bit about that in the course of doing some of our research. Okay, let's see if we can go to the next question, Jennifer. So the next question talks about housing types. And with respect to people in particular who have special needs or who are disabled, what housing types are in short supply for those folks? Again, the question is in the chat. Accessible units or access to the building. Yep. Right. Accessibility issues again, right? Being able to get into the unit, being able to get from the parking lot, for example, to the unit, having buildings that are in compliance with Section 504 and the ADA. Yeah, Section 504 being the HUD accessibility standards for HUD programs, accessible parkings. Yeah. And then a specialized complex for folks who are blind and deaf. That's interesting. Okay. Right. Issues with parking. Service animals, that's great. Again, that's the first time we've heard that, but I think that that's applicable across the board. But with respect to this population as well, I think service animals are a key component. I totally agree with that. Yeah. And then on the service level, one comment I see is that helping people to get into housing and making sure they know what they're signing with respect to their housing and the costs associated with it. The cost of deposit, it looks like I think this is the cost of the deposits for pets. I think that's what this is assuming to say, that if you actually am in a rental right now, I just sold my house and my dog and my cat cost us more money every month. So totally get that. It's in the rent bill every month. So yeah, there are, and those rents are in some cases very high. You're absolutely right. And so again, for people who need service animals for one reason or another, particularly people who are blind, this is an issue. Although really you shouldn't make somebody pay a pet deposit for having a service animal. Okay. I think we can go to the next question. Or Alex, whoever's running this. So next question, question 7 is, what are the fair housing challenges that you see in your community? And again, we are in the process as we're doing the consultation, the data collection, and the gaps analysis. We're looking for any and all information that you have related to all of the components of the HOME-ARP plan. So do you know of any data or information that's available to help you understand the current gaps that are there in the shelter and housing inventory, and what the fair housing challenges may be in your community? This is very hard information to get data on. Accessibility to housing and understanding service and housing gaps can be really, really difficult to get hard data on. So if you happen to know of anything that's available or work with an organization that deals with this issue and tries to create equity in your housing and homeless system, please put a response in the chat or come off the mic. And the question is again in the chat. Digital divide, yes, right. So that's really interesting. So depending upon where the units are, what type of housing it is, there's not access to technology that helps to bridge the digital divide, which still exists. Really interesting. Yeah, that's a good one. Again, I haven't heard that one before as part of our interviews and other work. So thank you. It's a really good one. Anything else about fair housing challenges in Mesa? Anybody wants to put in? Aaron, you want to elaborate a little bit more? Accessibility, diversity in one part of the valley, it sounds like. I'm curious to know what you mean by that, if you're willing, if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
And I may not be accurate in what I'm saying, so anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. From my knowledge, there does tend to be a denser population of needs in the west side of Mesa. So I do see that a majority of our services and housing is provided on the west side, but we are seeing a trend of more need in the East Valley. So there is some housing, fair housing challenges on the east side of Mesa. That's why I said looking for some more accessibility and diversity in the East Valley. So we're talking like east of Gilbert Road.
Okay.
And that would include the public transportation that was mentioned in the chat.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what it sounds like you're saying is that there's a little bit of a concentration on the west side of West Valley. Is that correct? And not as much availability on the east side, or did I get that wrong between these?
You're correct.
Okay.
But we need to diversify and make sure that we're also serving those who need the services in the East Valley as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, that's very interesting. Okay. So a lot of folks are confirming what you're saying, Aaron. So yeah, thank you. And yes, we're trying to collect data on housing unit availability and some other things. We will have an actual housing community meeting as part of these community meetings to talk about that. We're hoping folks are building affordable housing in Mesa, but that's one of the things we're trying to collect data on, how much affordability is in the system, whether it be tax credit projects or other supported affordable housing projects. That is some of the things that we're trying to get data on to kind of see what the inventory is. Hard information to get, but we're trying to collect it. And it sounds like what is being built is potentially not affordable from what's coming in the chat. Good stuff, really good stuff. Thank you. All right, I think we can go to the next question, Jennifer. This is a very important question that we'd love feedback on. This is a fairly new and unique program. It carries the name HOME, which you might be familiar with as a HUD program, but this is literally its own program with its own kind of rules and requirements that are built into the notice for HOME-ARP. Again, it's a one-time stimulus funding program that has to be spent by 2030, September 2030. It's not going to be there every year. It's going to just be here for this period up to 2030. So this is a great opportunity for homeless providers, service providers, housing providers, other components of your community to work together and collaborate on the right types of projects and services that are done in the city. So what opportunities for collaboration do you see as part of our consultation and planning process? And how can we incorporate that into the decision-making process once we look at all the information and the gaps analysis for the city? So what opportunities do you see as providers or people interested in this issue in the community for collaboration? So Lori has a comment about, and I don't know Mesa very well, so I apologize. I live in Portland, Oregon. A comment about empty structures and lots. So it sounds like there might be some places in the community where, for whatever reason, you have empty structures or lots that could be used for development. So I think that's what you're saying, Lori. So if I got that wrong, I'm sorry. Please let me know. You can use the chat or come off mute. And then there's a comment from Charlotte about strategic planning. This is really what the HOME-ARP process, allocation planning process is to some degree. Although I greatly appreciate that comment, this is a strategic planning exercise in part. The plan, of course, has to be submitted to HUD, but the plan components require analysis and they require consultation. And they require the city to establish a budget for the choices it makes for its HOME-ARP activities. So that is a form of strategic planning. So I like that. I agree with that. You have to have it, especially for limited federal funds. Talking to neighborhoods, it sounds like, is also part of what Charlotte's recommending. Any new housing needs to be accessible so that people can get to jobs and get access to fresh food. That is not often, that doesn't happen sometimes. Sometimes they're located outside of areas where people can get access. For collaboration, Aaron talks about sharing data on current projects and upcoming projects. That's actually a really excellent suggestion, because how this money fits into what's already in the pipeline, if you will, or potentially in the pipeline for other resources and other types of development and services is really something that should be planned around. And I think that that's a really excellent idea. And incorporating the your local shelters around animals and service animals. Development community collaboration, yes. I mean, I think that to some degree that's going to have to be discussed and see if they have the opportunity to work with providers and work with different types of housing models. I think that's a really good one too. And then again, the abandoned areas within. Now, yeah, and then transportation. So yeah, I don't know if that's completely COVID related or if that's just economic related in the city, but it sounds like there might be some opportunities for development in certain parts of the city. Again, we can't do anything about state or local laws that require certain types of housing be built. We can't really address that. Food gardens is always a good, yeah. Water concerns, yeah, because of the area. Yeah, very good. I mean, there are lots of nonprofit organizations in the community, and I think that collaborating, yeah, organizing and collaborating around this particular resource is going to be done, but I think that you're just emphasizing the importance of it. There's no doubt that this is going to be done by the city. And one of the reasons we're having community meetings is because we want that engagement, regardless of how difficult it is. We want this engagement. So I appreciate your comment. We're going to keep engaging. Drop-in centers, yes, yeah, and navigation centers. Yep, okay, thank you. Yep. And those are all things you can collaborate on. Great. Okay, I think that's the end of the questions, if I remember correctly. Okay. Again, you can still comment in the chat. And then you can send any additional questions or information that you want to Jennifer, but you know, Jennifer, I don't want to be left out of this party, so I will put my email in there.
Yeah, you can add it to the chat.
I'm going to add it to the chat. There it is. You're welcome to email me as well. I love to hear your comments.
Yeah. So we are continuing to collect information from the community far past this meeting. As I mentioned, as of the start of this meeting, there were 2 other meetings scheduled for tomorrow to talk about housing and then also services. And I'm going to ask Alex if Alex can drop the registration link into the chat. If you haven't already signed up for one of those meetings and you'd like to attend a similar meeting like this one, but focusing on those other topics more specifically, then feel free to sign up if you haven't already. But breaking news, as we were doing this meeting, the city let me know that we are going to be adding another meeting that will be held in the evening so that folks have yet another opportunity to find an option that better fits their schedules. So we're going to be adding an additional community meeting. Stay tuned for details on that. Check the city's website. And that meeting is yet to be scheduled, but will be scheduled in the next few days. So keep looking back. You can check the city's website and Facebook page for that information. The topic is likely to center around services, but we'll probably mix in, a few questions on housing and homelessness just to make sure that we're covering all the different topic areas for folks who, were only able to make that evening session. So definitely keep an eye out for that information. And then additionally, we have that online survey that we would love for you to complete and share with your networks. So Alex, if you could again drop that survey link into the chat, please take the time to do that. It doesn't take very long, but it will help us better summarize and prioritize the different uses of the funds and collect more information around what the needs are for those qualifying populations that we talked about at the beginning of the session. So I'm sure you're wondering, well, this is great. You're collecting lots of great information and doing all this data analysis. Well, what happens next? So the way the process works for the HOME-ARP allocation plan is we take all this information, the city reviews it and comes up with priorities based on your input, based on the data that we've received and reviewed and analyzed, and we'll list priorities that have been identified. And then the city will make some decisions about how the funds will be divided to address those priority needs. And as I said, there's always more needs than resources, but I always aim to do the best possible to meet the highest needs in a way that makes sense with other resources that are available in the community. So for instance, we may find that there's a great need for one particular kind of service. However, there are folks who are providing that service, whereas there's also a need for a different kind of service that isn't really being covered. And so even though both of those services have high needs, since one is already receiving some resources and the other not so much, maybe that service will be funded. And that's if the city even decides to fund services. So the other important point here is that jurisdictions are allowed to decide which of the eligible activities they pursue. They're not required to do all four. They can choose just one, they can do all four, or any combination in between. So lots of decisions to be made, but once those decisions are made, the plan is fully drafted. It will be made available for public comment. And we are aiming to have that public comment date start mid-February, likely around the 15th of February. And it will be available for public comment for the required 15-day public comment period. And so keep an eye out for that as well. It will be well advertised on all of the online networks. It will be published in the newspaper, and information will be provided for how folks can look at a copy of the plan and provide comments. So once that public comment period is finalized, the city will look at all the comments that were received and decide how to address those in the plan. And then the plan ultimately gets submitted to HUD for review and approval. And as we mentioned earlier, the plan is due to HUD by March 31st, 2023. There was a typo in the slide. So 2023, this year, just a couple months away, the plan will be due. And under our schedule, we are submitting that plan early in the month of March. So you can rest assured that will be submitted well in advance of the deadline. And then HUD has 45 days to review the plan, at which time they can make comments, ask for clarifications, ask for additional information changes, or approve the plan. So at a minimum, we're looking at mid-May for an approved plan if the plan is approved on the first submission. Lots of folks get comments to their plan, often just to provide more clarity around different topic areas. And if that's the case, the city then has a little bit of time to make those revisions, send it back. HUD has some time to review those changes. So that could make it a little bit of a longer process, but we're looking somewhere mid to late May to around June, early July for a completely approved plan from HUD. And then at that point, the city will be able to start implementing the plan. So that's the process. So basically, there will be more opportunities for folks to chime in on suggestions for use of funds, either before the plan is published for comment or during that public comment period. There will also be public hearings that will be held as part of this as well. These are the community sessions that we're doing, but there will be additional public hearings as well. So lots of opportunities for participation. And we are very grateful for the time you spent with us today. This is where we get our best information, is by talking to folks who are living with these concerns or working with those who have these concerns. So we're very grateful for your time and your perspectives. With that, we're going to wrap up today's meeting. We'll look forward to seeing you again if you've registered for another.